In the bustling city-state of Athens during the 5th century BCE, beneath the splendor of its democracy, philosophy, and artistic achievements, lay a social structure deeply reliant on slavery. Slavery was not just a peripheral institution, it was foundational to Athenian life, from homes and workshops to temples and government buildings. The hands that built and sustained Athens were often bound by chains, either literal or social. Modern historians estimate that the total population of Athens at the time ranged between 250,000 and 300,000 people. Astonishingly, as many as 80,000 to 120,000 of these individuals were slaves. That meant that slaves made up approximately 35 to 40%, possibly even more, of the population. They outnumbered free adult male citizens, the only group eligible to vote or participate in political assemblies. While citizen men numbered around 30,000 to 40,000, the total citizen population, including women and children, was about 90,000 to 100,000. Another segment of society, the metics, resident foreigners who were free but lacked full rights, numbered between 10,000 and 20,000. These numbers reveal a paradox at the heart of Athens. The freedom of the citizen was made possible through the unfreedom of the slave. Athenian men could debate in the agora, write tragedies, or train in the gymnasium, because others enslaved men and women handled the cooking, cleaning, labor, and menial work that sustained daily life. Slaves in Athens came from a variety of sources. Some were captives taken in war, others were victims of piracy or the slave trade. Children born to slaves inherited their status, ensuring a constant supply of laborers. Many slaves were foreigners, often from regions such as Thrace, Asia Minor, and the Balkans, non-Greeks seen as outsiders and, therefore, suitable for enslavement. Enslavement was not typically based on race, but on foreignness, defeat, or vulnerability. The most common type of slave in Athens was the household slave, known as an oikos. These individuals lived and worked in their master's home and were considered part of the oikos, or household unit. Their daily lives were filled with labor that sustained Athenian domestic life. Household slaves performed a wide variety of tasks. They cooked meals, cleaned, fetched water from public fountains, and shopped in the markets on behalf of their masters. Many were skilled in weaving and textile production, especially in more affluent households. Some served as child care providers. In fact, the pedagogos was a male slave assigned to accompany young boys to school and oversee their behavior, playing a key role in their education and discipline. Female household slaves might act as wet nurses, trophos, maids, or attendants to the women of the household, especially in wealthier families where women were kept largely secluded. These female slaves often developed personal, if complicated, relationships with the women they served, being their constant companions in a world where Athenian women had limited freedom of movement. Living conditions for household slaves varied. While some were treated well and trusted, others faced harsh discipline. They usually slept inside the home, often in modest spaces like storage rooms or kitchens. Their clothing and food were provided at the discretion of their master. Legally, slaves had no rights. They could not testify in court, own property, or defend themselves in legal disputes. If they were abused, their only recourse was to seek asylum in a temple. Nevertheless, some long-serving and trusted slaves could earn small wages or receive tips. Over time, a few managed to save enough to buy their freedom, a process known as manumission. Occasionally, masters freed their loyal slaves in their wills or as a reward for exceptional service. Not all slaves in Athens were privately owned. Some belonged to the polis, or city-state itself. These were the public slaves, known as demosioi. Unlike private slaves, demosioi served in civic and administrative roles essential to Athenian democracy and state functions. Among the most visible of these public slaves were the Scythian archers, or toxotai, a unique force of around 300 to 1,200 slaves from the region of Scythia, modern Ukraine, and southern Russia. Clad in distinct clothing and armed with bows and whips, these archers functioned as a kind of police force, maintaining order in public spaces like the agora and during assembly meetings. While they could not arrest citizens on their own authority, they were instrumental in crowd control and public discipline. Other demosioi worked behind the scenes in the Athenian bureaucracy. Some served as scribes, clerks, and secretaries in institutions like the Bull Council of 500 and the Ecclesia Assembly. These slaves were often better educated and more literate than many citizens, tasked with drafting laws, recording decrees, and maintaining public archives. Others worked in law courts, assisting magistrates, organizing jury panels, and delivering summons. Some public slaves had more gruesome duties. Executioners and torturers were always slaves, often public ones. In Athenian trials, only slaves could be tortured for testimony, a practice known as basanos. These slaves carried out sentences, maintained prisons, and ensured that judicial punishments were enforced. Public slaves also worked as mint technicians, producing Athens' famed silver currency, and as laborers in construction projects, maintaining temples, roads, and public buildings. Despite their enslaved status, demosivoi were generally better off than private slaves. They enjoyed more stability, could live independently, earn wages, and even marry unofficially. Some were eventually able to purchase their freedom, and because of their service to the state, they were more respected in public life than private slaves. Beyond the household and the city, many slaves toiled in industrial and agricultural settings. The most infamous example was the silver mines at Laurion, southeast of Athens. Thousands of slaves labored under horrific conditions, extracting the silver that underpinned Athens' economic and military power, especially its powerful navy. These mine slaves worked in narrow, dark tunnels, with little ventilation and high risk of collapse or suffocation. Their labor was relentless and brutal, and they were frequently chained to prevent escape. During the Peloponnesian War, in 413 BCE, a significant number of these slaves escaped when the Spartan general Gylippus encouraged revolts and desertions. This mass exodus devastated Athenian silver production and demonstrated just how fragile and dependent the economy was on enslaved labor. In the countryside, a smaller number of agricultural slaves worked on private estates, helping with crop cultivation and animal husbandry. While less numerous than in other Greek city-states, they were a crucial part of rural Athenian life. Though rare, there were stories of slaves who rose beyond their station. One remarkable example is Pagine, a non-Greek slave who worked in a bank trapeza owned by two medics in Athens. Due to his exceptional skill and integrity, Pagine earned his freedom and eventually took over the bank. He amassed considerable wealth and prestige, and in a rare move, was even granted Athenian citizenship. As a citizen, Pagine fulfilled the obligations of a wealthy Athenian, funding public works and sponsoring festivals. His son, Apollodorus, would go on to become a noted litigant and speaker in the Athenian courts, solidifying the family's place in society. Slavery in Athens was not just an economic convenience, it was a pillar of social organization. It allowed citizen men the leisure to participate in politics, engage in philosophical debate, and cultivate the arts. The Athenian ideal of freedom was made possible by a vast underclass of people who are denied that very freedom. Even though Athens is often celebrated as the cradle of democracy, it is important to remember that this democracy was built on the labor of those who had no rights, no voice, and no legal personhood. The brilliance of the Athenian Golden Age shone brightly, but it cast deep shadows over the lives of those who toiled in silence.